very sensible.
Why don't we look at that issue, because that's our theme for the night, is this unifying authority of Peter. And let's specifically focus on this verse in Matthew, which was so important to you. Let me read it,
Okay.
and then have you reflect on it. It says in Matthew 16, 18 through 19, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Now first, what did you do with that as a Baptist?
You know, I went through my files about 2 years ago, and I pulled out an old little monograph that I had written about this. Now, from a fundamentalist position, a Baptist position, I could not accept the fact that Peter was the rock, because to do that put me in a very uncomfortable position.
Right.
I was beginning to accept Catholic thinking, see. It's just why so few Baptist churches ever preach on Mary, because you're kind of getting too close to the line. So I had written this paper to prove that Peter was not the rock. And when I look back at it now, it's really a rather silly piece that I wrote, and it's almost embarrassing. But I was honest at the point, and trying to be honest with my beliefs.
The problem being, though, that a bit blind to the categories that preset how you will then interpret Scripture.
Right. Absolutely.
Which is very common,
right.
very, very sadly common. Well, okay, well then, now all of a sudden your mind is looking at it a different way.
There's two parts of this passage here. One that says, "You are Peter, and on this rock I'll build my church." One of the unfortunate things in English is we lose the impact of that verse. Yeah. Because when Jesus first said it, it would have sounded like this: "Peter, you are rock, and on this rock I will build my church." There was no ambiguities there in the Aramaic. Mm-hmm. And in the Greek it lost a little because it went from Petra to Petros. Mm-hmm. And then in English it really lost it because now we've got Peter and rock. It's totally divorced. Sure. But originally it was, "Peter, you are rock, and on this rock I will build my church." There was no question about that. "And the gates of hell will not prevail against it." I brought this rock with me tonight.
I'm so amazed you have that here. Yeah.
3 weeks ago, I was in Caesarea Philippi. We made the trip up beyond north of Galilee up to Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus made that statement in Matthew 16. Ever since becoming a Catholic, that was somewhere I wanted to go and to sit and to think and pray and read and look at that area. For Jesus, it would have been a good 2-day journey through the mountains. It was not a light thing that he did to go up there. He went there for a purpose.
He didn't grab a bus.
He didn't grab a bus, and there was no McDonald's along the way to eat either. He had a rough journey. There were wild animals and everything else. But he went up there in order to make that pronouncement to Peter because of that unique environment. Right now, at that rock, when you go to Caesarea Philippi, there's a huge rock. It's about 500 feet long and 200 feet high, and it kind of overhangs you. And on the right in the left, there's a huge cave, which at the time of Jesus, they could never find a bottom to it. They would always lower ropes down, but they could never find a bottom. And that was considered to be the jaws of death. That's where the gates of hell, the gates of the netherworlds were there. And they turned that into a center of pagan worship. Now, in regards to the rock, one of the interesting things is, on that rock was a temple to the divine Caesar Augustus. It was built there. Herod had built it there for Caesar in appreciation for some favors. So here Jesus is at this rock, the false rock with a false temple to a false god. And he says, "Peter, we're going to do something different now. You are the true rock, and on this rock I will build the true temple, the true church, and the gates of hell here will not prevail against it." The pagans would throw sacrifices into this cave, and there was a spring. And as the water would rush out underneath, that was the source of the Jordan River. Came right out of this cave. If you think of that implication of Peter as well, that out of this rock came the water that watered all of Israel. All of God's people were watered from the spring that came out of that rock. So Peter, now being the rock, the false temple's gone, the true church is being built on Peter, and the water that comes from the church waters God's people. It sustains them. And this gates of hell now would not prevail. When the pagans threw the sacrifices into this cave, if the blood came out in the stream, it meant that God had rejected the sacrifice. But in Christianity, it's the opposite. When the sacrifice of Jesus was made, it's when the blood was flowing that God did accept the sacrifice. So here we've got this great scenario. It's very sad that most commentaries do not bring out this issue. They don't bring out the background of Caesarea Philippi.
It's exciting to think that there was no question to the apostles, all these symbolisms.
Oh, no, they knew.
Or to the ones they taught,
No.
the early church fathers.
They understood.
It was there. But when we have forgotten history, when we've lost track of all of that, or when we say the Bible alone, separate from all that stuff, then we miss all those great symbolisms.
Not only that, but we're Gentiles.
Yeah.
The majority of Christians and American Catholics are Gentiles. The Jews understood these things. The Jews in Israel understood not only all the implications of the temple and the sacrifices, but they understood Caesarea Philippi. Right there now there's a plaque put there by the Israeli government that said that this site, with the mountain and the caves and everything, was a singular site in all the Greco-Roman world. So Jesus went there for that specific purpose.
Wow.
Can I tell you about the